You're listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where we explore the connection between running and positive mental health. We do this by talking to runners from all walks of life who generously share their experiences with us. So you don't miss an episode, I've created an email list for you to join. Check the show notes for more details. Without further ado, I'm your host, Michelle Frost. Let's get moving. Welcome to this episode of the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. Today we dive into the inspiring journey of Matt Pearce as he shares his transformative trail running experience with us. Discover how running became his path to freedom, helping him to overcome challenges, find inner peace, and embrace adventure. Get ready for an episode filled with motivation and inspiration. Enjoy. Today on Fit Mind, Fit Body, I am excited to introduce you all to Matt Pearce. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Michelle.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Friday afternoon, so things are good.
Friday afternoons are good, aren't they? Especially if you work a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's quite nice to have a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Matt, you're a referral, so a bunch of your friends have already been on here. So I know I'm really excited to learn more about you. I haven't met before, although I think by your cap, I can see that you were probably at Mount Kenyani Run this year, if not many years. But were you there this year? So I was there this year. So we were in the same environment.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I haven't ran the Kenyani Mountain Run, but I've certainly been a part of the committee. Not long after its inception, really. So
well, I thank you. Thank you
with KMR. Yeah, and your name is certainly familiar. I had a lot to do with volunteering, and coordinating that, in the first KMR, and then a little bit more to do with that in the second one. So. Name's familiar. I think I might have seen you somewhere
out there on those trails. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, Tasmania is quite tiny. It's not. I've had quite a few overseas calls recently, so it's quite nice to chat to someone who's back here as well. So it's kind of groovy. So thank you for agreeing. It's not always fun to just jump on until you get here, and then it's really fun because this is a cool thing to do.
Yeah. I've definitely listened to a few of the podcasts. It sounds like a pretty good adventure, and like I said earlier, thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
I'm excited. All right, let's start with, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Derwent Valley, so not too far from Hobart, a place called New Norfolk.
Yep.
So grew up there.
Beautiful.
I was an 80s kid, so lots of outdoor stuff, which was cool, and it was all right on the doorstep. So we had the Derwent River running through the middle of town and mountains on either side. So
I love that.
That was my playground essentially from a very, very young age.
Did you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have two sisters. Had two sisters. Have one now. So one passed away not too long ago.
Okay. Oh, so as a family, were you a very active family?
Yes. Yeah, I was certainly active. My sisters were a little older than me, so they moved out, not too long after I could start remembering things.
Oh wow!
But look, I was always active, and my mum encouraged me to play a lot of those team sports. So never really excelled at any of them, but from memory, I can sort of recall playing about every sport that was on offer. Didn't really find the niche, but had fun doing it.
So you enjoyed that kind of, the active body. You weren't so much a sit around at home watching whatever was on on telly in the 80s.
There wasn't much going on the TV front. But what was going on was a lot of cool movies. Spielberg was big at the time, so there was The Goonies and Indiana Jones and all these really cool adventure movies, and that sort of played in part, to where I lived as this big adventure playground. So I took the love for these adventure movies and took them out into the bush, and
I love that.
You couldn't get me home.
That's awesome. So when you finished school, what did you do? What was your path to work and adult?
Oh wow. When I left school, so my upbringing, there was a lot of fishing, a lot of camping. So my dad
Okay.
always, took me up to the
Yeah.
highlands. We done a lot of fishing and camping. When I left school, I remember him saying, "Oh, would you like a job on a fishing boat?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
Wow.
That sounds great." And next thing you know, I'm sort of watching Hobart get smaller and smaller as we're sailing out of the dock on a orange roughy trawler. And
God.
24 hours later, I had turned from a boy to a man, as they say, and it was like, where am I and what am I doing here? It
Did you
was,
throw up a lot?
I did, yeah, I did initially, but once you get those sea legs,
Wow.
it was very cool. It wasn't cool what we were doing to the oceans at the time,
Yeah.
and certainly that didn't last too long with the Orange Roughy, but it was an experience of a lifetime.
So how
So I
old were
did
you then?
that.
Was that like 15, 16 or 16, 17 type of time?
Yeah, it would have been. I would have. I would have still been 15. Yeah, so it was at
Oh,
the end of
wow.
'92.
And
Mm.
how long did you do
And
that for?
I did that for close to a year,
Yeah.
and yeah, then life sort of took a bit of a dark turn for me after that.
And what are you happy to
Interesting.
share? Whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, look, I sort of had odd jobs here and there after that,
Yeah.
but yeah, sort of at the end of high school, um, drugs became a bit of an issue. So,
Mm,
marijuana
yep.
took a bit of a hold, and it kept a good hold for 20 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a fairly big part of my life, and a really big journey. But there's not much that I'd want to share or could share,
Yeah.
because it was just one of those things that
The period. Mm,
when you're in that type of addiction, and cigarettes, alcohol,
yeah.
and marijuana. Fortunately for me, my mum would always say it's a gateway drug, and fortunately, the gate didn't open, so it never
Yeah.
progressed any further, which I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for. I obviously had
Mm,
enough sense, but it also kept me outside of myself as well.
yep.
So it kept me out of having to deal with the challenges of life, or it kept me out of having to feel the pain from love, or the
Mm-hmm.
loss of you
Yep.
know, love, relationships and all that
Mm.
sort of stuff. So it was this sort of, the Pink Floyd song "Comfortably Numb."
Yeah, I was going
You
to say
know,
very numbing type of experience.
yeah, it was that. It provided this really comfortably numb sort of
Mm.
place to be. So yeah, until you come out of that,
Yep.
um, life doesn't seem that difficult.
My I have a 31-year-old who started that journey when he was 16, and I would say he's only come out of it in the last 12 months. So it's not like I don't understand from another perspective as well. So that how, it's a tough time. Yeah, it's really
Mm,
hard for
mm,
everyone
mm.
concerned. It is
Yeah,
hard.
definitely. And it's really odd, because when you're in it, you are functioning,
Yeah.
you are living,
Mm,
you are receiving all these bits of information from other people, which you will not actually process until
yeah.
you come out the other side of
Yeah.
that. Like,
Well,
not really process.
yeah, you're processing it in a certainly different perspective on everything that you maybe
Mm,
even almost can't relate to now. Like when you look back, you go, "Oh, why did I think like that?" or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
challenging
No, it
time.
certainly, made me really appreciate those early years, and certainly the
Yeah,
last 12 years.
yeah.
Or
So what was the catalyst for you? What was
Oh, the catalyst.
why did you
That's
go
yeah,
from that what you've just described to
yeah.
what we're
Well, I was
seeing here,
very
what I see here?
fortunate enough to have. I went to Queensland for a while,
Yeah.
and held a few different jobs up there. I came back and rekindled a relationship with my
Oh,
high school sweetheart. So it
well,
was,
that's very cool.
yeah, it's just, I was still in the midst of that addiction, and it's really hard for me to say addiction,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
was it's such a highly functioning form of addiction. You know,
Yeah.
it sort of hides really well. So yeah, no, I came back with Bianca, my now wife partner,
Yeah.
and I was fortunate enough to be part of bringing another life into the world, who you met
Wow.
earlier,
I
actually,
did.
Bronte, and it really was instantaneous for me. Um,
Oh,
it was just that very first moment of holding Bronte that I just said, that's it. I'm just done with the
the
drugs
lifestyle
and the
and
cigarettes.
yeah.
So I was really fortunate, and realised in that moment how powerful everyone can be in that situation, because
Mm.
I'm sure it's not just me that could achieve something like that. I know how hard addictions are to break sometimes, but it was a real eye opener for me. So
Wow. I love that.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
what work and things did you do once, like, did you, I don't know, what did you do after that, because you'd have been talking about holding down odd jobs and that kind of thing through this other
yeah, that's
period.
right. So
What did you do after that? Yeah.
for that 20 years, there was so many different jobs in there.
Mm.
There was one job that I had where, I had a really bad back injury. That was, that's interesting. The job I had was a result of, around 16 or 17. I decided to move to Devonport with my sister to try to remove myself
Yeah.
from
And the
that situation.
environment. Mm.
Ended up finding the same people and the same problems where I went. But I found a job, and what happened then was I had a really bad back injury that ended up putting me in hospital and traction with a compressed L3 and L4.
Oh gosh.
They were very surprised I didn't actually snap my spinal cord because of the position I went in,
Oh.
and that then allowed the addiction to take hold for the next X amount of years, because I didn't
Yeah.
really have the will or want and
You're kind of
all that sort of
incapacitated a bit
stuff.
in that sort of level of pain that's just in the background, but there all the time. That sort of.
Yeah, that's right. So now I had the perfect excuse just to
Mhm.
maintain that addiction.
Sounds familiar.
But yeah, so where we went from there, was I talked to a friend who was working in the disability sector, and they
Okay.
said, "Oh, you would be fantastic. You'd be a fantastic support worker." And I said, "Look, I've got no qualifications." They said, "But you do. You've got so much life experience."
Got
And I'm
line. Yeah.
thinking, "Oh, yeah, right." Huh? So yeah, went in for an interview. That was 17 years ago, and I'm still there now. So I absolutely love working in the industry and
That's
helping
amazing.
vulnerable people, and yeah,
Oh, I
so
love
blessed
that. I
to
love.
have been welcomed by the organisation. In terms of not having any skills or
Yeah.
qualifications,
And now you probably, I
so
mean, you have even more, as you said, number one,
yeah,
you had
well,
the life skills, but now you also have all of that experience as well for the last
yeah,
17
yeah,
years, you say.
definitely. Yeah, and I done the support work for a little over 10 years, and then
Yeah.
slowly sort of made my way into the office in a managerial role, and
Yeah.
I absolutely love what I do. Empowering staff now to achieve the goals that the clients most want out of their support.
Wow.
It's awesome.
What sort of clients do you all work with?
A huge diversity of clients. We have clients with intellectual disabilities,
Yeah.
autism, Down syndrome,
Yeah.
through to sort of mental health and trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, the list goes on.
And
Essentially,
age group, is it like for adults or all through?
it's in our organisation, it's probably 18 through to 65-ish. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love those kind of stories, where I often see my son a bit like that. He's actually doing apprenticeship at the moment, but I see him. He's talked about being able to use his experiences as well to go on and help people in different roles, but often in those kind of caring roles where supporting other people because you've had such a background where it's enabled you to be able to do that, which I think is
Yeah,
It's a
I
purpose
agree.
for it all.
I believe um, that is certainly the case, and it feels like a bit of a giving back
Mm.
to the community, and that but it's also just the passion to work with other people and watching other people build upon their capacity and their ability to live a more independent, engaged, and fulfilling life. So it's I'm really, really lucky to have found
Great
that
gift.
job.
All right. So this is a running podcast, weirdly. So how did you start running?
Where did that happen?
Tell me, when did that happen in all of this very busy life that you've just described?
Yeah. So it would have been around the time that Bronte was born. So that's almost 12 years ago. Just started bushwalking, and at some point in that, I just started running back, whether I was late to an appointment or work or whatever it may have been. Just started running back, and then that was basically it. So I sort of just ran with the hiking boots I had on, and
Oh, wow.
there was the reason why I was there to start with was because it was like I always had this thing of what I used to do as a kid, and that was run around in the bush, and I wouldn't come home to dark. On the weekends, we'd pack a lunch and literally go bush, and we'd see how far we could actually get into the bush before we had to turn around and come back. So, there was a connection there early on, and there was a bit of cross country in high school as well. But I went for a walk one day, and it was not far from where I live at the moment, and I think I just must have started running and thought, oh, that's what I used to do. This is a kid. This used to be cool. This was fun, when we used to run around in the bush. So it sort of relighted that connection. And then it sort of just spiraled from there, essentially. So that's how I started. It was literally just going for a walk in the bush and then remembering my childhood. It was almost like that cloud that the addiction caused for so long made me forget about all those things prior to that addiction. So when I was 15 and younger, I used to be active. I used to go in the bush. I used to do a lot of that, and it sort of reawoke me.
It's kind of like I tried marijuana once when I was like 19, I think. And I used to say the only reason I didn't keep doing marijuana was because I didn't feel like under control at all. But at least when I was drinking alcohol, I felt like I was under control. Might not have been, but as a teenager, I'm talking about, when you're really silly. But with marijuana, I didn't. So I think I wonder whether, you're talking about that reflecting back to when you were a kid and that those feelings of running through the bush and the freedom and things that provided, that for some people, drugs and different kinds of drugs have different things for different people, as you know. It provided some kind of replacement for what you get when you go out, the endorphins that we get when we go out and we go to the bush or we go running or we do, some of these adventurous outdoorsy things that we talk about on the podcast, where the drugs can replace that kind of buzz. It's like a buzz or an endorphin stuff, I think. So I wonder whether, as you said, it was like a cloud, but it probably provided you with something in your brain, some little thing that clicked off that says, I'm getting enough from this, doing this drug, rather than needing to go outdoors to get it. Whereas
that's right. It's almost like the cup is full, and using the cloud is quite a good analogy because it's a cushy cloud, and the cloud usually goes hand in hand with the couch, and it's like, don't need to, I'm happy, I'm content. And that's how it was. And it wasn't until that catalyst that we talk about that came along, that then all of a sudden there's this huge empty void. How do I fill that? And I don't even know why I went for a walk that day. I might have been contemplating something pretty serious because, along with the addiction is also the other side of that, which is that depression that kicks in, that there's such an empty void, and oh wow, you've just wasted 20 years of good life. So I think that was part of why I went for that walk, which turned into a run. And, but that's the why, that's essentially why. It was like I was starting to wake up again, but then along with that came the the guilt, which is another
How,
part of my journey.
how do you deal with that, the guilt?
Well, initially I found running,
Mm-hmm.
and what I found from running was you get to go inside. So I was always running on my own. I never found running groups. I never did Facebook at the time or anything like that. So I wasn't aware of this great wide world of a running community or running events and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff. So I just started, the good old bush running and
Yeah.
having a jolly old time on my own, back into these adventures like, the 80s movies that we talked about, finding this real simple pleasure from it.
Kind of moving
Um,
into Forrest Gump by the sound of it, but not on roads, but into the
yeah, well, I've
into the
been
mountains
called that
instead.
a
Yeah.
few times with the beard. Even I even feel a bit like Jim Carrey when he was in the movie Yes Man. He got to the point in his life where he just stopped saying no and just started saying yes, and that felt a bit the same for me with running. If someone said, "You want to go and run this crazy?" Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, let's go. No thoughts. Yeah, yeah. Even though I just had no idea what I was doing, but that came a little bit later.
Yeah.
So the guilt was more, how do I manage the guilt? Then I found that running, if I just physically exerted myself so much that I wouldn't have those inner demons telling me what such a waste of
Mm.
life you did for that last 20 years. So I started pushing really hard with my running. And as a result, I was getting fit. I didn't realize that this was going to have a sort of knock-on effect to
Mm.
where I branched out further. But yeah, certainly, it running provides you that opportunity to look inside, and you might find lots of good stuff in there that you can then bring back out into the
Mm.
world.
Yeah.
But you also will bring a little part of that bad stuff back as well, and it's running sort of helped me, bring it all up and then put it back where it belongs.
Do you worry about an element of that running away? And like in that it's the guilt, like it's just another emotion. And I'm not a therapist, my mum is, but I'm not. And she used to, when I got divorced in my 20s, she would say, because I was quite an avid runner even then, and she would say, "What are you running away from?" Because I ran a lot more while I was getting divorced at that point in my life. And I often, and just hearing you reflect then, it made me think about that and wonder, yes, running can push things to the back, but is that
Mm,
always what we want to do?
mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
it then would
and
come back
and
and grab you some other time if you don't deal with that. I don't know. I'm
yeah,
just,
exactly.
mm,
So I dove head first into that, what and I don't know whether anyone's coined this or whether I've heard it somewhere and not realised, but what I come up with that guilt, that my past, guilt of wasting so much time. I remember running it just came to me and I just thought, you know what, all this stuff is bad fuel for a good fire. The good fire being the running, the bad fuel being the guilt. Some
yeah, I
people
love
run and
that.
are inspired by, other runners and all
Yeah.
this sort of stuff. But my inspiration comes from looking back at that other man and
Mm.
going, you're an absolute jerk. Now run.
Or to
You're
run
not
as
walking
far
up
away
this
as
hill.
from that, from that other person
Yeah,
as I
yeah.
can.
So, I've got 20 years of really good stuff that I can use. And it was making peace with that. It was like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
okay to use that
Yeah.
bad fuel.
Yeah.
Um, Initially, yeah, I think I found that if I couldn't run, because I was getting injured all the time because
Yeah.
I'd basically gone from not running for 20 years to thinking I was some elitist, and I was just smashing out
Yeah.
crazy runs, to the point where people were going, "Are you okay? Because you look really unwell." I just lost so much weight in such a short period of time. You just couldn't stop me. I was
Mm.
just, I'm just running. I'm Forrest Gump in this. Like,
One addiction to another.
yeah, yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly. And fortunately, I had some good colleagues around me that supported me, and certainly my partner Bianca, who I'm fortunate enough has decided to stay with me through that initial,
Oh,
awakening,
yeah,
because that had its ups and downs as well.
of course. Yeah, it's something. It's interesting with running. It can, as much as we're in here talking about how amazing it is, there are elements of it, depending on where you are in your life or your personality or whatever, where it can actually take on its own. It can be a little devil in your life where it really can push you and almost break you. And I don't just mean if you run long distances and run for days or anything. I mean it can be a bit disruptive if you take it to that level, if you want, and not in a positive way. So it's finding that the path for you that works, because it's different for all of us as well, I suppose. But anyway, all right. So you then went on and you went and found a community of runners, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I don't know how.
I was going to say, how did that happen?
It just happened. I can't really recall how I ended up, this introverted person that just all of a sudden rocks up to a running community such as the Hobart Trail Runners.
Yeah.
A little bit prior to that, I just, the other part of it was let's just jump on every possible race out there because, the medal, the bib, this is cool. So I started meeting people through that, attended a few park runs, met some really nice people there. And one of my colleagues, Doug Strofield, who's one of the original mountain runners, he just took me under his wing, and that was awesome. So, but yeah, I made my way to Hobart Trail Runners, and that's when things took another pathway because I was the yes man. So I'm soaking up absolutely everything, and being part of that community really, it made me feel connected. Where I didn't have that before. I had mates in the past, but they had those same types of addictions. So we weren't really motivating each other through, what we were doing.
An activity that was, more positive activity, I suppose, if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. So with HTR, I got to know some guys and girls there, and one of which who now is a really good friend, Lincoln Quillen, who you've talked to in the past.
We have.
I just remember sitting at the table and he said, "Oh, do you want to go for a run?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And he's like, "Oh, we're going to attempt the Penguin Cradle Trail. It's this overland type of walk. Takes a few days usually."
I've done 2 days of it as a walk,
yeah,
as a hike.
So at the time, like he said, it's 80-90K, and I don't think anyone's attempted it before. I'm like, "Oh, okay, no worries." And I remember going home, and this was wasn't too long, somewhere between that and when we ran the Penguin Cradle Trail. My sister passed away, and my sister's initials were actually Peter Catherine Thorpe, so PCT. So all these connections, and it was like, oh wow, this is, because when that happened, I remember saying to Bianca, I don't think I can do it. I'm not in the right headspace, and she knew that I needed to go and do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really spoke to Lincoln about it until we actually started doing the run. Before that, I'd done a few sort of 50K events and a half marathon here and there. Yeah, we went and done that, and fortunately we hit a spot up on Black Bluff Ridge, unfortunately, because the weather turned on us, and I was just so driven, and with thoughts of my sister and stuff, that I was very fortunate that Lincoln actually turned and said, "Look, we've got to head back down," because he could see that things were going back. Like I knew I could feel my fingers or toes or anything like that. But I was just so driven, and I was so fortunate to have Lincoln with me there at that time. So that was my first entry into a crazy run, and it was certainly one to remember.
And it didn't stop you because you.
Oh, definitely not. I will one day go back and complete the PCT. I was invited back when Lincoln, Gareth, and Drew actually completed it, and I was actually in hospital at the time. I had a cyst in my mouth and had to have surgery. And I remember laying there, and I got a video message from Lincoln at the spot where we turned around. and yeah, I was just in tears instantly. You know, it was
Oh,
just like, it was amazing. So I'm so glad the boys went back and got it, but I'm definitely coming for that FKT.
you're itching. We
So I'm going to go back one day and complete
I love that.
that trial.
Um,
Yeah.
there's something earlier on in the podcast, like this has been going for a couple of years now, but we would often talk about, it just reminded me something you said then about, especially for blokes, there's women too, but definitely for blokes, that when there's stuff going on for them, really unlikely for them to sit down and talk face to face about stuff and bring it up.
Mm. Yeah.
That's probably why men's sheds are good too, a good environment, because they're focused on something else. When you're running, you're running side by side or whatever and chatting, there's it's not as intimidating for a bloke to open up to another bloke or a woman or whatever, because you're not looking directly at each other. So you feel a bit better about expressing things, like, maybe you talked a bit about your sister or whatever, as you said, when you were out on that run. And I just find that is another reason why running with people actually, I love running by myself as well, but I also have a couple of times a week where I run with friends. And I find, I know those people. I've been running with some of them for like 20, 25 years. And I know the minutiae of their life. But I could go and hang out with my sisters that I only see, once or twice a month. But I feel like my running friends know me, in that kind of daily life, even better than my family does, because of that nature of the things that you share. They're just everyday silly things, right down to really important things that are going on in your life. I just find it it's a fascinating thing, and I think really valuable to have as a human being, to be a part of those groups.
Definitely agree. It's hard sometimes for me to go, is it because I'm just doing this yes type of scenario, or is it because of, the running provides that platform? And I think it's a bit of both. I think, once you accept vulnerability, in that sense, then, there's no limitations really, on the conversations you can have, the friendships you form, and running that for me has been made through running. So
yeah, I love
so
it.
fortunate.
I love it. So how long ago was it? That was a couple of years ago. Was it that attempt at the Penguin?
Yeah, that was back in 2021, I think. So
after COVID, like everybody now, that's one of our pivotal points in our history. So
it was, yeah.
after COVID.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no. So yeah, that sort of started the adventurous stuff really, and it was the place where I wanted to be with running, and I found that real quickly. I'd done lots of road races, started getting pretty quick, and even on some of the trail events, I was starting to get up there, and then there was this instantaneous moment, and I'm so thankful to Doug Strofield for this. He said, how long do you want to run for, young trail runner?
Oh, that's one of my questions I have on the podcast. Stop it.
He always said, how long do you want to run for, young trail runner? And it was all about that longevity, and while we were running, and it sort of just sat me down, and it made me realize that what am I competing for? What really, that then in an instant just became such a non-existent drive, that I sort of really stepped back from running races, and just even events. I still do some of the bigger events. I want to experience UTA, so I did that, even though that was the year that UTA became the road race. So that was quite an event in itself. But yeah, I've done Fatal Mountain Run a few times now, and
wow,
some of the other great events that we have. So the events still interest me, but definitely, I'd be more excited if someone came up with this cool adventure. That's where it's all at, I think, for me.
That is often something I ask on the podcast, and I think it changes. And as you just demonstrated, it changes for us over our life of running, what motivates us and what drives us to get up every day and train or whatever, whether it's an event. Some people are focused at just getting faster at those events. And as as Doug said, if to me that says, well, how long at some point in your life you won't be able to get faster, probably. Tends to be what happens. And so what then? So it's kind of, to me, I really like that reflection that you had then, because
it's kind of hard
powerful.
to wake up after 20 years and go and sprint out, 10K in 40 minutes or whatever.
Why do you want to?
The body's like, what are you doing? And then, well, it's the same thing, even if you're not going fast and you decide you want to go and run 100 kilometers over some of the most horrendously beautiful terrain in the world. You're going to get that same sort of pain. But pain's actually an interesting one. So that's something,
comfort
that's something I look
versus
for.
pain.
I love that pain, the good pain, not the bad stuff.
How do you tell how do you tell the difference?
Oh, well, the difference is, when you're not getting up the next day because you literally can't walk. Although that's hard as well, because then I know I've had a pretty cool adventure. But yeah, the pain's more around the injuries, and the injuries came more because of the running fast or packing too much into a week. So it's all about finding that nice balance, which I think for me it had to come at the expense of suffering injuries, because I just wanted to make up for lost time. So I was just doing that through lots of running.
Apart from maybe FTKs, competition isn't a big motivator for you, for your running? Like, it's not wanting to run
I'd have to say
faster
that
than the person next to you.
There's no motivating or no motivation that comes from competing for me.
So what do you think your motivator is? I'm sure we've touched on it in the last 5 minutes.
My motivator is it's first and foremost that guilt that we talked about, and making up for lost time.
Yeah.
That I've had a couple of friends who follow me on Strava say, how do you manage to run almost every day the same loop around your local area? And it's because if I don't, I'm that person that I used to be, and I'm not, so it's not that I'm running away from that, but it's like I'm just so motivated because I don't ever want to be that way again. And I know that I'm not. Even now, if I stop running, I'm not going to be that person, because the change that happened, it changed who I am as a person, how I see the world, how I interact with other people. That awakening wasn't just because the cloud lifted, or it was, but it's a life-changing event. So my motivator is me and all the things that make up me. So when I go deep inside, it's like, visions of me. I mean, so it's interesting, because I was thinking about this and I thought you might ask it. So 2 things that motivate me is when I run over that one spot on my local loop, when I first went for a run around this little 5K block that I had to stop and walk, and it was a slight incline. So I hit that spot now 12 years later, and that motivates me to push harder. It's just that I know the exact spot. I remember the hiking boots that I was running in, and I remember having to stop and walk because my lungs couldn't take it anymore, and just the
lots of
thoughts that
uncomfortable.
I can't that's one of the things. And then, funnily enough, it's if someone drives down the street, if I'm doing my local loop, and they've got the window down and they're smoking a cigarette, if I see that cigarette, it'll remind me of the old me. If I smell that cigarette, far out, it's just like, it sends off this signal. It's like, yeah, that's right, that used to be me. Nothing to do with the person, but all to do with the
trigger,
the feeling that it conjures up inside of me. So some weird motivators, but
they work. So
they work, and and I'm sure alongside of that is the people that I've met since running as well. a huge influence on me as a person, not just as a runner, but as a person. I've been very fortunate to have met some really, really lovely people. And as a result of that, they've encouraged me to, go forth and be part of the Canadian Mountain Run Committee.
Yeah.
I'm on the Cradle Mountain Run Committee as well at the moment. I used
Wow.
to
That's
used to sit
awesome.
on the TTRA, so the Tasmanian Trail Running
Yeah.
Association Committee as well.
Mhm.
So that's the yes man, and then I had a conversation with Lincoln, and Lincoln grounded me again. And he's like, it's okay sometimes to say no. It's because you've got a full time job, you've got a family, you're a father, you want to do your running,
Yeah.
there are other things in life. You're on the KMR committee, the CMR committee. And I
Yeah.
was like,
You need
how
to.
can we take that step back? So I'm really fortunate to have some really good people, and definitely my partner grounds me in that sense as well.
Wow. That is so busy. How do you fit it all in? How do you, like, that's often a question we ask on the podcast. How do you fit it all in?
Yeah.
Like all those things you just pointed out. And then obviously, well, number one, do you have goals? Like events that I know we talked about you're not a big event person, but there are things that you want to do that you therefore need to have certain kind of training ticked off before you get to the start line or the start of whatever it is. So how do you fit that in? Because sometimes the pressure to get those things done is quite up there, especially if you have a big event that's not far away.
Yeah. So for me, there's no formal plot out a plan and stick to it. It's
Okay.
just stay busy. Um, the 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 with KMR and stuff like that, like I said, I'm very fortunate. Lincoln's very supportive of the role that I play there.
Mm-hmm.
And we have spoken about, taking a little step back and, sort of reassessing things. And it's just, I'm just staying busy. And, as long as I'm spending the quality time with my family,
Yeah.
and I'm enabled to, the time to run,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel that what I do is okay. My work's also very supportive around everything else that I do as well. So,
Yeah.
I'm not a real good planner. And if I've got a run coming up, there's no such thing as training for that run. It's just just staying fit enough to do that. And what I
Wow.
found at one point in time was, I think you become a little bit complacent when
Mm-hmm.
you start having the ability to do the long runs. So,
Mm.
if someone rings up and wants to go and run Overland Track or Frenchman's Cap or one of those other iconic places we have in Tassie, out the door and gone. And because I got to that point where I could do that, all the really important stuff dropped off in terms of the recovery, stretching,
Yeah.
looking
Mm-hmm.
after the body,
Yeah.
because I'm fit enough to do these really cool
Mm-hmm.
adventures. I don't need to do that stuff. And I'm certainly not any better at that other stuff, but I'm starting to recognize it more and more as I get older, that stuff's just as important, So yeah, just
Yeah.
trying to fit it all in, doing the best I can,
Strength
essentially.
work. That's
Just
important.
looking after myself, registering when it gets too much to know that it's okay to step back. It's
Mm.
okay just to say,
Mm.
no, I sort of need to take a break, because I wasn't very good at that.
Do you do things like are you a morning runner, afternoon runner? I know that obviously the trail running, Hobart Trail Running, I think is an afternoon thing that you meet up for.
Mm.
Or does it just depend what's going on in your life and you're not particularly favoured of one or the other?
So I would definitely love to be a morning runner. Most of our big adventures start in the morning,
Silly o'clock.
but no, the afternoons. So the afternoons is like that juggling act of coming home, preparing dinner, spending time with Bronte, Bianca, running, coming back, hopping on the computer, doing some committee stuff or whatever. But I'd love to be a morning runner. If I'm sure if I tell myself enough, that it'll happen at some
One
stage,
day
because that would free up so much time
of your
in the
afternoon.
afternoon. Yeah, definitely. So
Because if I don't run in the morning, and I mostly run in the morning, not always, but mostly, then at the end of the day, all that stuff gets on top of me. And I suddenly go, well, the thing that I won't do is the run because all those other things take place. So I'm very envious of you that you're able to keep the run forefront of your mind. Like I'm going to do the run, even though I've also got to do all these other things. Like my brain doesn't let me do that.
Yeah, no, I think when you become so driven, it makes it a bit easier. When that drive isn't, I've got to do the run because I've got an event coming up, or something to that effect. Then the motivator for me is what makes me get out there and do it. And running, like as we know, it's just one of the greatest things that we can do as humans.
Absolutely, we're made to run.
Oh, definitely. We can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Star jumps, hop on one foot, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
But it doesn't give you that same endorphin release as what running does.
And especially when you add that nature level as well. Like you talk about trail running.
Yeah, definitely.
The nature level as well. I think takes it to another thing.
It does, yeah.
Do you listen to anything when you're running?
I do sometimes. So I'll always take like a little earbud with me. I'll never start out listening to anything, and generally it's when the inner voices become too loud.
Okay.
So and those inner voices can be saying all types of stuff. They can be like you can't do this. You're not there, or the ITB's flared up again. And now I've got to walk, and so it's generally not until I get into that real pain cave, whether it be a physical pain cave or a mental pain cave, that I'll chuck one earbud in. I've always got one ear open to the world because trail running, you need to be somewhat aware of your surrounds. And I'll generally put on some music, and that'll just sort of give me that motivation to push
block
through
it out a bit.
Get it done, yeah.
And you run with people each week as well when you go to the Hobart Trail running?
Yeah, so that sort of dropped off a bit for me. Where I'm at, it's a fair way away to get to the local meets, and there's even moments where I have those guilt feelings around that. I was so present every week, and it's like, I've got to get back. I've got to get back to the community. It's like the community that gave me so much, and it's a big part of why I sit on these committees and stuff. It's about giving back. So, it's always there to get back, but life does get in the way, and unfortunately, HTR is usually the first one I'll just sort of mark off as, okay, well, I can't make it this week.
Can't do it now.
But no, I still every now and again I'll sort of pop my head in, and it's really good to see the next generation of Hobart trail runners coming through. Actually, it's evolving, and it's really good to see. And Gareth's doing a really, really good job at leading the group. So
that's awesome. Have you had many injuries? You've talked about a couple of injuries during.
I think I woke up every muscle and ligament in the body, and they have screamed back at me. For being so dormant for so long, I think everything was quite comfortable. So lots of those inexperience in the injuries that come with inexperience. From both ITBs to both hip flexors to calf issues. I think I've rolled my right ankle so much that it just doesn't hurt anymore when I roll it now. So I literally run with a roll cage on the right ankle. So I strapped the right ankle because I've pretty much destroyed that one. And, I'm very stubborn. So, I didn't go and probably get the right help because nothing's stopping me type of scenario, apart from when I roll the ankle. So, and I initially didn't deal with the injuries very well either.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I'd say I'm getting much better at it. I don't know whether Bianca would agree, but I think I'm getting better at it. I tend to recognize it now as it's okay not to run. But I've had my fair share of injuries. Definitely.
I would say you identify as a runner. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like you think of yourself as a runner. And so when you have those injuries and you can't run for a period of time, it does bring up all those kind of, well, who am I if I can't run, those moments. And
yes,
talk, how do you deal with that?
The cool thing is that, you know, that whole life-changing moment, it allowed me to process things differently. And initially, when I couldn't run, I'd get pretty crabby, pretty angry, you know, and it certainly, you know, Bianca would certainly let me know when that was happening. Where now I'm starting to realize that what I'm doing is actually going, yeah, I'm injured, but I've now got the ability to override that part of me, as in that mental health that, you know, where I'd sort of drop down into this sort of depression, and you know, it's like, no, I'm going to attribute that with that old me. I'm going to park that little bit of depression with that person that I used to be, and I don't want to be that person. So if I get injured, I've got to do the best that I can do, just like I do when I run, to not be that way. So I'm starting to change my whole thought pattern around that. Doesn't necessarily work all the time, but you know, it's a challenge. It's a journey. You know, I'm dealing with a bit of an injury at the moment. And I've had some of those ups and downs that come with that as well. But I've got a really supportive group of people around me. So, you know, it makes a huge difference.
We're all a work in progress, and the journey that you're on doesn't actually have a destination. You know, we're not, so it's actually okay. You know, you're not, like you said, we identify as a runner, but maybe sometimes we're a runner who's not running at the moment. But we want to, you know, we want to keep moving, and maybe go riding or swimming or whatever it is. You do whatever it is to help with your recovery. It's kind of I just hope that you never get an injury that means you can't run at all for a long, long time. How long do you think you're going to run for? Like, what's your, I know we touched on that before because that's what your trail said. Trail mentor.
Yeah. I've got no plans to stop. You know, there's some really good people around me, like I said. You know, and then I sort of draw inspiration from, you know, our local group. You know, Steve Appleby, Doug, Neil Hawthorne, Andrew Palfreyman, all these amazing people that, you know, they're just going to run forever, I'm sure. You know, so I must be able to as well.
Of course, and why not? In fact, especially sometimes there's an advantage to starting a bit later. You've got more.
Yeah, I hope so. There was an advantage in the sense of, you know, I just want to soak it all up and you know, just absolutely take on every opportunity that comes my way, which I realise now that I can't because there's only so much time in the day. But
What do your family think about your running?
Yes, like I mentioned, you know, initially it sort of did overtake things a little bit, and I became a bit selfish, I think. But you know, now I think you know, I've moved past that point and registered that as you know, I've accepted that, you know, I can't just do this running thing all the time, and I have to manage it better. So supportive. I think with the amount of injuries I've had, I've probably scared Bronte off running for life. I've come home with some good injuries. You know, I've cut the above the eye and that all the good stuff. So yeah, it's
trail running injuries.
Yeah, my partner Bianca runs as well, so she does a bit of the running, which is cool.
But, that's it then. Being Bronte's got no choice. Two parents that do running, she'll be.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, you know, I encourage Bronte to run, but I certainly don't enforce any of that sort of stuff. It's a choice. So,
when I've talked to parents on the podcast, we often reflect on, even if your kids don't run while they're kids, the fact that their parent or parents run means it's something that's in their genetic toolbox, or at least that's how they think about it in the back. Like, they may not even be able to verbalize it, but when they're an adult, should they want to get fitter or whatever, running is one of the things that would come to their mind, because they know mum, dad, whatever, ran. And so so even if they don't seem to be doing it now, doesn't mean it's not lost on them for the future.
No, that's right.
Nobody
And, you know, like Bronte always places quite highly in the cross countries and stuff. So, you know, she always quotes Lincoln, you know, and Lincoln told us some stuff about breathing, and it's like, hang on, that's my job. What's going on here? You know, like, we'd go to HTR and, oh, I've got a stitch, Dad, and Lincoln had run past, and Bronte would sort of take off, and it's like, oh, so, you know, it's good. She does run. She definitely does run. Yeah,
See? So interesting, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. It's funny. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, like even my 29-year-old daughter's been sending me, she lives in Melbourne, but she's been sending me pictures of her. She's been getting fit this last couple of months, going to the gym and things. And now she's, the last probably 3 or 4 weeks, she's been sending me pictures of her watch, because she's been going running as well, which she used to run as a child, but she hasn't really run in her 20s. So it's quite interesting.
Cool.
What do you have anything that you're aiming to do at the moment, like in the next, by the end of the year or next year, early next year? Is there any sort of big thing on your horizon? I know you said you don't really train for anything, but are you thinking about doing like any event or adventure?
No particular events. You know, I always look forward to those adventures, and there's a small group of us that usually meet up once a year and do some crazy adventure, and in between that, it's, you know, wherever I feel like heading off to, and done a recent run up on the west coast, which was pretty cool. But in terms of future, so there is something inside, and I think it's all of that old me, and it's going to manifest in something. You know, there's something in there that says, I'm going to do something big.
Oh,
I don't know what it is, but it's going to be big, and it's going to be silly, and there's not going to be an end per se. There's going to be me running until I decide I don't want to run anymore.
Your Forrest Gump season.
Yeah, and it feels a bit like that. Like, I really feel driven to do something, not for any type of glory, for any type of FKT, for any type of achievement someone else has done. It's more that I just want to see what's on the other side of that push, you know, like where we go, find the limit type of scenario. It's, you know, it feels like there's something out there waiting, and every time I start to manifest it, I end up getting an injury or something like that, and that just sort of suppresses the thought a bit. But yeah, I don't know, you know, watch this space, because there's definitely something coming that, you know, I can feel it. You know, it's a really odd sensation. You know,
hopefully you'll come on and share it with us on a podcast. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
if
definitely.
You would do that.
No.
I'd love that.
For sure.
I had Pat Farmer on the podcast a while ago, years ago. Anyway, we talked about, like, I asked him, why do you run these silly long distances? I mean, he does a lot of his not necessarily trail, or he does everything. And he said, you know, for someone who's a career of running lots of long distances, he said it was because he loved the way running those extra long distances for days and weeks or whatever, the way it pulled you down as who you were, like broke you down is probably a better word, phrase, and then built you back up again by the time you finished whatever it is you set yourself out to do. And I've since then had a number of people on the podcast who run ridiculous distances for days, and they've said a similar sort of thing, that they really like that. It's an evolution of yourself, or a transformation or something. And I wonder whether the way you described it, that you're feeling some kind of something inside you that's tapping on those kind of doors as well, you know, that you want to have that kind of transformation, if you like. I don't know if that's the right word. I spoke to what's his name? I can't remember. I'll have to tell you. He's in New Zealand, but he's a practitioner with there's like I want to say Buddhist, but it's not Buddhist, the Sri Chimney organization, and they do some events that go for like a month or more, and you just have to get up every day and run between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day to stay in it. Anyway,
Nice.
so they do
Wow.
those kind of things in it, but it's all about that like transformation stuff as well.
Yeah,
So anyway,
yeah.
it's interesting. Running has definitely been used. Included, there's also some like Buddhist monks who they run something like, I don't know, a marathon every day for a year or something. But the purpose is that to try and have those kind of experiences and to tap into what that means is for you as an individual and maybe humanity. I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's fascinating to play with, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the best way I could describe that what I want to achieve, it's not that it's going to be one big event, but the the one thing that I really enjoy the most is an uncontrolled run. So when I set out, I don't know where I'm going to end up. I'm going to turn left, I'm going to turn right,
Yeah.
and I've done that a few times, and it's the best run. This really uncontrolled run that's I've got no preconceptions about where I'm actually heading, and obviously there's the safety aspect of that as well, and knowing your limits and all that sort of stuff. And I think my mind does that on its own anyway. I know what my abilities are. I know, if I'm stuck in the bush, I'm going to be pretty okay. I've grew up in the bush. It's, that's fine. I'll get myself out of trouble. But even with road running, I've left here and I've just said to Bianca, is it okay if I give you a call in a few hours and let you know where I'm at? Would you mind coming and picking me up? And I've ended up like 40, 50 kilometers away in either east, west, south, or north direction.
Wow.
So that's how I feel that my big adventure that I want to have on my own is going to be somewhat uncontrolled. I don't want to feel like I have to run to a certain spot to have achieved something. I just feel like I just want to go out there and experience this uncontrolled free flow form of running.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Pretty cool.
Someone else I spoke to, I'm really terrible at them. Oh, Kai Bretz. He's in Melbourne. He's a German who lives in Melbourne, wrote a book called Turning Right, because he's a very good runner, but he's also like a professional business person. And he got a coach, and the coach said, get your friend to come with you because we want to break you out of your patterns, because he'd got to sort of a plateau or something. And they turned right. And at that point, when they left his house, and at that point, Kai realized that he'd always turned left. No reason, but he'd always turned left. And that kind of was, the opening up to a bit like what you were talking about, that kind of adventure where it's not all planned because of the kind of person he is. He's very structured and so opening things up and allowing, therefore, other things that you have no idea what they are to come in to your life is kind of exciting. And the way you perhaps can get to that next, wherever you're going, whatever your journey is, it's kind of.
Yeah. And look, I wouldn't suggest for someone to do that wasn't familiar, with where they were. If you hadn't ran certain trails before, I wouldn't just suggest turning right, turning left on a whim.
They're in the streets of Melbourne. I think they probably
Yeah,
catch a tram
exactly.
home.
Yes. No, I wouldn't suggest go, because it's a really cool way to run. I've done many of those types of runs on Kanani, on our local mountain here, where I've just taken off, and it's really cool to have a look at that Strava map of wow, it's like I had no idea I was going to head that way, and it's cool, but with the road running where I'm at, I've got a lot of back country roads, a lot of gravel roads not far from me, so that's that uncontrolled run, because what that enables you to do is there's lots of shops, lots of servos along the route, no matter whether you turn right or left. So I wouldn't mind just heading off one day and seeing where it takes me and how far it takes me.
It's so exciting. is there, well, with your running, what do you think your life, well, it seems like a silly question, and I still persist on asking it with everybody, but what do you think your life has that you wouldn't have had you not started running? So what's a given your life that would be missing without it?
Well, that's a big one, because I really feel like it's given me life.
Mm,
You know, yeah, it's yeah. Without running, I don't know. I don't want to know. You know,
yeah,
I don't want to think. Well, potentially I was bushwalking, so maybe I
yeah,
would have that might have just kept progressing further and further. But
yeah,
yeah, no, I'm very very grateful to have found running. It saved me in a lot of ways. You
yeah,
know, I can't really reflect yet on how much that it actually saved me, and the opportunities that it gave me, and and made me be the person that I am now. Yeah,
yeah.
still on that journey.
And never stopping, because we've established you're not going to stop running unless
No, we're not going to stop running, but I think more importantly, we're not going to stop being present,
yeah,
and that's what running taught me mostly, was just being present, so you could actually, process the world there and then, and not reflect on it and wish you'd have done it differently.
it's interesting. I was reflecting on that the other day while I was out for a run, because I too run most days. In fact, every day I've got a chart over there, 320 something days.
Yeah, I was wondering how far along you was there. I remember listening to a podcast. I think you were 180 days in, so that's amazing. That's
I think I'm, I know I'm 323 days. So,
wow.
what will I
That's
do when it's a year? I'm not
amazing.
sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was reflecting because weirdly I was running. It was another day when I was running, which is every day. And oh my gosh, what were we talking about? That was really important. Hell's bells. I hate that. What were we just saying?
We
Ah,
was discussing about what would we do if we wouldn't run, and
oh,
how
yeah.
that would.
I can't remember. It was really important. Oh well, that happens. I shouldn't have started talking
Does.
about my running streak. I wouldn't have oh, that's right. Being present. That's why.
Yes, yes, that
Yes,
was
being
it.
present in the moment. When
Mm.
I was running, I was thinking, because I run my own business. I work for another person as an executive assistant, and I volunteer for lots of running things, as like you, but up here in the north. Um,
Right. Well,
and
maybe you can give me some tips on how to manage it.
all those things.
Like I said, I wasn't too good at it.
And I've got 5 children and 4 grandchildren and a life that's just busy. Anyway, all those things. But then, and any one of those areas of my life can cause me stress. Yeah. Like it just, and sometimes those things get blown out of proportion because you get your brain. We were talking about our brains before they start having these conversations that are unwelcome, but they keep going anyway. And then I go for a run and all of that, it doesn't matter anymore. If you know, like, because I'm more present while I'm running, all those things are just put down. They're not going away. They're still there, but they're not taking up so much of my thought processes. That's what I wanted to say about what I've discovered through this, daily process of running as well. It's been a great way for that release of just daily thought bubbles that go off in our brain, to just let them go for a while. And I appreciate it. For my mental health.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when we did the West Coast run. So we ran from the head of the Pyman River up to Tenor. So it was 60 or 70k.
Wow.
One of the most beautiful places in Tasmania I've ever seen. You feel so remote when you're there. It's
Wow.
just another world altogether. And I remember lying in the tent that night and just reflecting on the run, and you reflect on all the beauty, none of the pain. You just
No.
reflect on the beauty.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that through that whole run, I had no external thoughts. I was so present in that moment that, the only time I allowed any sort of thought to enter was thoughts of family. I remember thinking about Bianca and Bronte
Yeah.
a few times, because you're present, and being present means that you're grateful for the life you have, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden that brings up really, really positive imagery in your mind. Aside from that, blank,
Wow.
absolutely blank, and so lucky. Like, that is so good, because even though you're not consciously thinking, I'm sure that these neural pathways are opening, and you're packing bits and pieces away, and your brain's doing all these weird and wonderful things, and it's doing that because you've allowed the brain to relax. It's like all this external stimulation, and being present in that moment just allows you just to chill out for a while and let the
Yeah.
brain do its thing. And you have these little fleeting moments of positivity come and go, with the thoughts of family. But I just remember laying there thinking, I think it took us 8 or 9 hours to run, and it was like, oh wow, like, how often in our lives do we have 8 or 9 hours where you can pretty much just go into this autonomous mode?
It's like being
And,
unplugged.
yeah, just unplug.
Yeah. I love that.
That
I
was,
love it.
yeah,
I
it was
do.
a it was a good space, and it was good to recognise that as well.
Oh,
Because
yes,
sometimes
to reflect on it.
we don't want too much of like, that was such a good run, and I got this out of it, and I got that out of it, and not taking this whole moment of where, oh wow, that actually really was something special,
Yeah.
because I was able to detach from all the stresses of life.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And
mm,
it puts things in perspective. That's probably, like, I've done quite a bit of bushwalking in Tassie, and when you get up, so I get the same stuff when I'm bushwalking. When you are up there looking out across those massive vistas, you just think, well, yeah, my life is pretty awesome, and all the little
mm.
things that bother me, they don't really, it's not a problem. It just puts everything in perspective, and you realize that life is pretty cool, actually, if
Yeah,
you let
not
it, if
not
you let it be.
not a problem in the world. It doesn't matter if
Exactly.
you're running into 50-kilometre headwinds, and you've got sand blasting across your face, and you're running along a beach that is nothing but quicksand.
Yep.
You just wipe the grin off my face, and there was not a worry in the world. It was all because I was blessed enough to find running.
Yeah, I love that. I think adventure too. There's something in human nature about adventure. We're quite an adventurous species. We kind of like to see around the corner and what's over the hill and that kind of stuff too. It's kind of it's in
Yeah,
our
no,
nature.
it takes me back to my childhood every time I
Mm.
do these adventures. It just reminds me of that little guy running around the bush up in Norfolk, and
Oh,
finding caves, and
it's so cool.
awesome trees to climb, and things to jump off. And,
I love it. All right. I've kept your ages. Before we go, I've got a couple more questions. But what is there anything about running in particular that you wanted to share that you think we haven't touched on in your story?
oof, no, gee whiz. I'm sure there's so much that we haven't touched on, but I hope I've touched on some of those key things that really helped me in my journey of life and mental health, and
Yeah.
becoming a better me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we sort of breeze through most of that stuff in small snippets,
Just
and
incidentally.
yeah, yeah. I think I
Excellent.
think we covered a fair bit of it. So
We
you
have.
know,
Um,
yeah,
Before you go, one thing I ask everyone
yeah.
is, if someone came up to you and said, Matt, I'd love to start running, what would you
Mhm.
suggest to them? So a beginner runner.
I would certainly suggest. Well, I'd suggest, hey, there's an awesome podcast that Michelle Fox does. Here's the
Oh my
link.
gosh, you're the
Um,
first person who said that in 200 and something episodes. Yay.
yeah,
Go,
no,
Matt.
that's what I would point them towards the link to my podcast with Michelle. But I'd
Good
certainly say
plan.
go and jump on a podcast and have a listen to some of the stories,
I
because
love
what
it.
you'll find is a story that relates to you.
Yeah.
Um, and 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 I guess I definitely uh, I'd suggest finding the why. Sometimes you hear
Yeah.
people talk about the why, and For me, that's the big one. Regardless of anything that you want to achieve with your running, make sure that you've got a good why, and you fill your pockets with that why, because when you're down and out and you hit that spot on that track where you remember that that's the spot that you had to stop and walk, reach in your pocket, pull out the why, and the why is because I don't want to be that person, or the why is whatever, and that's going to relate to the individual. But if you can hold on to that as the motivator and the big driver, then anything is possible. There's no limit to what we can do, and that speaks for everyone, I think. There's so much involved with technique and all the other bits and pieces that come with running, but you're going to find that's the journey. It's to stay on the journey, I think you really need a good why. Doesn't necessarily have to be 20 years of the guilt that I sort of carry as my why, but I've turned that into a positive. It's okay to have that, and that's what I guess I'm trying to say. It's okay. Find the why, pack your pockets full of it, put it in your running vest, pull it out when you need it.
Make a t-shirt. Put it on your t-shirt.
Just grab that why, and when you need it, it'll be there to pull you along.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Very cool. You could get like a little tattoo or something with your why.
Yeah, well, I used to get
symbols
blunted to write. Yeah, I got blunted to write some messages on my arm on my longer runs. And,
oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
that's so cool.
I've got the KMR logo on my arm as well. Because the event was really special, but it was everything that event meant to me in terms of the connections that I made, especially the connections I built on Canunny. So much to be grateful for, to have this awesome mountain right on the doorstep. So I thought I'm putting that on the arm, because not just the event, but that whole, the community that comes together,
what it represents.
Everything. It reminds me of the why.
That's beautiful. I love it. All right. Here am I saying that, thinking who's putting a tattoo, but you put the tattoo on what your why was. So I love that. Thank you. Don't jump off straight away. Massive thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing so much. I'm sure it's going to inspire heaps of people. Really appreciate you doing that. So again, massive thank you. I can't say thank you enough for coming on, Matt, and sharing.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'd love to talk to you about your running journey. Send me a message on Facebook or on the website and let's do it. I also wanted to let you know that I've created an email list so you won't miss any podcast episodes. You'll find details in the show notes and on the Fit Mind, Fit Body website, along with a bunch of resources on mindful running. They'll help you to get and stay mentally and physically fit. And I'll see you there. Plus, I'll be back here in your podcast player a few times a week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review. It'll help more people to find the podcast and get inspired to start running and ultimately to improve their life. See you soon.